You're listening to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. We all have leadership within us, and once we understand how to challenge perceived limitations, we're able to influence those we're leading. Josh is a leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. He's also a veteran of the United States Air Force with over 20 years of leadership experience. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's Josh in today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. Once again, I'm really excited that you're here. Can't thank you enough for regularly tuning in. In fact, you have tuned in so much that this podcast has officially surpassed 1,000 downloads. And so I cannot thank you enough for regularly tuning in and listening and sharing with your friends, your family, your colleagues, all of that good stuff. So please keep on sharing. Please keep on leaving a review. If you haven't left a review yet, I'm highly encouraging you to leave a review, because the more reviews this podcast has, the more the platforms that they're on will be able to push them to new audience members. New listeners are listening in regularly, and we are all on a mission to reach people and build leaders. So can't thank you enough for regularly sharing it once again. And please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. And of course, this entire episode, like all of them, can be found on my YouTube channel at The Bearded Leader. I'll say it again, at The Bearded Leader. So if you prefer to watch this podcast, head on over to YouTube, or feel free to visit my website, thebeardedleader.com, to see what else is happening. Speaking of what else is happening, if you or someone you know lives in the Houston, Texas area, I'll be hosting my Limitless Leadership Training Program in person on Wednesday, November 8th. And so if you're watching this episode right now, I'm currently holding up the Limitless Leadership Training book that we use for this in-person training. But I would love to see you there from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's 8 to 12. It's a 4-hour session on all things leadership development. We're going to be talking about culture creation. We're going to be talking about the roadmap of delegation. We'll be talking about the leadership mindset, how to affect change, and of course, we'll be talking about what we're discussing in today's episode, which is effective communication. So the namesake for this episode is effective communication. This is one of the hot topics of conversation for a lot of my coaching clients that I work with on a regular basis. We know that when there is a breakdown in communication, a void gets created, and oftentimes negativity fills that void. And so we also know that leadership is influence, but we can't influence if we can't connect, and we can't connect if we can't communicate. So questions that I want to ask myself if I'm leading a team of people, questions like, does my team feel the weight of my title or the energy of my leadership? Or what does it look like to be on the other side of my leadership? These are questions we can be asking ourselves, but we can also be asking our team. I'd want to know, hey, what is it like to be on the other side of my leadership? And feel free to be transparent, be honest, be direct, because I want to make sure that I can best serve you, best support you in the process of leading you for the sake of growth and development. Now, one of the greatest misconceptions about communication is that it's actually happening. I'll say that again. One of the greatest misconceptions about communication is the fact that it's actually happening. Sometimes it may not be happening. And when it is, when there is a conversation, there are likely 3 actual conversations occurring during the one, which is the one that I'm having, the one that you're having, and the one that we're having. And so the opportunity to improve our communication is such a critical piece of leadership that we have to capture in order to be the most successful as possible. And so through the course of this episode, this conversation that we're going to be having, I want you to be mindful of the 5 steps to effective communication. By the end of this episode, we're going to be sharing 5 steps to effective communication. But before we dive into those 5 steps, I want to share an acronym that I learned in the Air Force. For those of you who don't know, I was in the Air Force almost 20 years ago, so I'm certainly dating myself. But I had an enlistment in the Air Force, and one of the first new words that I learned, in fact, right out of tech school. I mean, so we graduated basic training, 6-week basic training at the time. I think it's a little bit longer now. I guess I had it easy. I don't know. But 6 weeks of basic training. And then the moment we get into tech school, I hear this word HUA. That's H-U-A, HUA. Okay, so I know it sounds a little strange, but for those listening, HUA, H-U-A, stands for heard, understood, and acknowledged. And this is one of this is an acronym that I've been able to take outside of the Air Force and apply to my own leadership skills. As I'm learning and developing more leadership skills, something that we all should be able to identify by now is that leaders are not actually born, leaders are created, because leadership is truly a skill that needs to be learned, honed, tweaked, practice in order to make the progress. And we've got to be consistent in the practice in order to make the progress. We've talked before about how practice doesn't make perfect. Practice truly does make progress. But going back to the acronym, though, heard, understood, acknowledged, these are three things that I think every person needs to feel when we're communicating with them. They want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. They want to feel acknowledged. And this word "feel" is so important. I go back to one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And when we're effectively communicating with those that we're having a conversation with, my challenge to you, my encouragement to you is to make it your mission in every conversation to make the person that you're communicating with feel like the most important person in the world. This is truly a possibility because if we're giving someone our undivided attention, imagine what that's going to do to them. Imagine how that's going to make them feel. Oftentimes, like Maya Angelou says, we may not exactly remember what was said or what was done, but we're going to remember how someone made us feel, and simply showing up for people, and of course communicating effectively can do wonders for someone. And so, diving into this topic of communication, I want to share the fact that a philosopher can take something simple and make it sound complex, but a communicator can take something complex and make it sound simple. And genius truly is the ability to reduce the complicated to the simple. So keep that in mind as we get into the 5 steps of communication. How are we able to simplify information that we're sharing? A lot of us have the content knowledge, but how can we communicate it in an effort to make sure that those listening can understand it? We want to make it understandable. We want to make it relatable. We want to make it as simple as possible for the sake of learning and growth, right? Growth and development is the name of the game. And so getting into the 5 steps to effective communication, the first of the 5 steps is to simply assume positive intent. Assume positive intent. So imagine you are at your workplace and think about the team that you're on. A lot of us who are listening right now, we're on a team of people. So some of us, of course, work by ourselves. Some of us, but some of us are on a team of people. And so when we're communicating with anybody, and even if you're working by yourself, you have people in your life. I'd like to think that you have people in your life. My hope is that you have someone in your life. If you don't, give me a shout. I'll be in your life, and we can both assume positive intent together. But here's the thing. We're working with people, whether at home, whether at work, whether at home, and we want to assume positive intent. When we can assume positive intent, it begins to eliminate the negative thoughts that we might be having based on this person's actions or words. And, one of the greatest mistakes that any of us can ever make is assuming that all of our thoughts are true. So the only assumption I'm encouraging everyone to make is one of positive intent. Let's assume positive intent. When we don't assume positive intent, and there's a breakdown in communication, as I shared earlier, when there's a breakdown, a void gets created, and oftentimes negativity fills those voids. And if there is a breakdown in communication, I might be thinking one thing, the other person might be thinking the other thing, or another thing. And the reality is both of us might be thinking thoughts that aren't actually, we might be believing thoughts that aren't actually true. And so what I mean by this is, think about in your own life, there's likely been a situation where you've experienced someone who maybe they come to you and say, "Hey, Josh, you seem upset with me," or, the other day, you said something or I said something and you just seemed bothered by this, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page, right? So the fact that someone came up to us just to try to clear the air, that's a win in itself. But think about the ones who don't. Think about the people who just assume, hey, that guy's mad at me, so I'm just not gonna I'm not gonna be in his presence, right? Or I'm gonna do this, that, or the other thing. And the problem is, again, the thoughts that they may be having may not actually be accurate. And when we can assume positive intent, we can know that it's coming from a good place. At the end of the day, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the more we can share with them how much we care by assuming positive intent and trusting that they have good intentions, then the better, and the less likely we're going to be experiencing those breakdowns of communication. So the first step, as I shared, is assume positive intent. The second is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. It's a fantastic book by Stephen Covey. I believe this is the 5th habit. Somebody can fact check me if you don't mind and let me know if that's accurate or not. But I think it's the 5th habit in the book of the 7 habits of highly effective people. But I'll say it again. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is a critical opportunity area that often doesn't get captured. And what I mean by this is when there is an agenda or an initiative or something that needs to be conveyed, a message that needs to be conveyed to someone else, our agenda or our motive is simply to go to someone, tell them what we want to say, and then move on. But the reality is we are trying to communicate effectively. Remember, there are 3 conversations sometimes happening for the one that's actually occurring. It's the one that I'm having, the one that you're having, and the one that we're having. If I want to relay information to someone that needs to hear a particular message, again, maybe there's a deadline on a project that got changed or something's going on where this is an important message that needs to be conveyed. When I convey the message, the hope is that the person receiving the message is seeking first to understand about the message and why and how, and then to be understood. Oftentimes, especially change, people don't like change. The reality is a lot of people struggle with change. It throws a wrench in their system, and they are, it can be frustrating for some. But when we seek first to understand and do our best to learn about, well, why is the change necessary? How are we doing this? How can I play my part in this change? Rather than saying, that's not going to work. I don't think we should do this. That's not a good idea. I'm just simply telling someone what I want to say rather than sharing information in a way that it can be understood. So I want to seek first to understand, then to be understood. The third step to effective communication is to fall in love with asking questions. Yes, fall in love with asking questions. This is one of those things where I have just come to learn that if we can just simply live a life of curiosity, if we are always living with curiosity, we're able to stay in this state of being a lifelong learner, committing to being a lifelong learner, thinking like a rookie, recognizing that I have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, knowing that I have a long way to go, but a long way to grow. And when I can fall in love with asking questions, I can now better understand who this person is that I'm trying to serve and support and care for. So when I can fall in love with asking questions, I now have a better understanding of who he or she is, how they operate, why they think the way that they do. And when I have a better understanding of that person, I can now serve them accordingly. Now, furthermore, I think it's important that we're mindful of the environment that we're creating when we ask the questions, and even what kind of questions we're asking. A lot of us, we might start practicing this concept of asking questions, but what questions do we need to be asking? I would try to encourage you to ask a lot of open-ended questions. So we want to try to avoid the simple yes or no questions. We want to try to ask questions in a way that warrants some dialogue. Because the more information we have, the more information we're receiving, the better we can understand this person and better serve this person. And when we're creating creating an environment, what we're doing is we're creating a safe place, space, and platform for people to share what is on their heart and on their mind. And so we're able to create this place and ask the right questions to really get to the heart of this person. Really, you create almost an intimate type of setting where I can truly learn who this person is. And furthermore, they can learn who I am as well. Because I'll say it again, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And being able to create this place is the concept I'm actually asking everyone to capture. Now, the example of what I'm describing is this. I'll give you an example. So let's say we're at our workplace and I'm trying to get to know someone on a deeper level, and I also want to know how I can best serve them. So scenario A is I'm going to walk up to someone's desk or walk up to someone's workplace and say, hey, you doing okay? Hey, you doing all right? Can I get you anything you need? And then we walk on. And so, we move on. And so when I ask someone, hey, do you meet with your team on a regular basis? Do you have a one-on-one with your team? And someone says, well, yeah, I have a one-on-one with my team. And they explain scenario A to me. That's at that point, I share with them, hey, I love the intent. I love the fact that you're making the effort. However, there are some things that we can do to go a little bit deeper. Number one, we're asking questions that weren't a yes or no response. So we're not really getting a lot of dialogue by asking the yes or no, the close-ended questions. Furthermore, we're catching this person off guard. This person has no idea that we are about to ask them questions like, hey, you doing okay? How you doing? Can I help you? Can I do this? Can I do that? And so we catch them off guard. They're likely working on something or doing something, so they're not really able to give us their undivided attention, and they're not ready for it anyway. So my encouragement is to get this on the calendar. Create one-on-ones with your team, and you can call them touch points, you can call them connections, whatever you want. At the end of the day, they're truly just a meeting, but I try to avoid using that word meeting because a lot of us have this negative connotation with the word meeting. It's this death by meeting approach. We have meetings about the meetings. And so if we're going to have these meetings, I want to redefine what a meeting looks like. And a meeting is for that person. Even though I'm scheduling it for that person. Remember, I want them to feel heard, understood, and acknowledged. I want their voice to be heard, their opinions to matter, their ideas to be considered. Not saying we're going to use every idea, but I'm at least going to say we're going to consider every idea. We don't want to shoot down any idea right away because what we want to do is we want to create a safe place, space, and platform for everyone to know that they matter and they're a very important piece of the team. So we're asking open-ended questions. We're getting it on the calendar. We're getting in a place where we can say, okay, you know what? Let's take a breath. Hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? And then we're going to get into some more questions. You can ask, how can I best serve you? How can I support you? How can I be a better leader for you? What can I do to show up for you in the way that you need to be successful here? And you are now able to learn information in a way that will allow you to best serve this person. And you're doing this because of the fourth step of effective communication. You are listening. You're able to listen accordingly. And when we can listen, we can really have a better understanding of who we're working with and how we're working with them. Now, there's a difference between hearing and listening. When we're hearing someone, we're simply waiting for them to stop talking so we can tell them what we want to say. When we're listening to someone, we are receiving information, we are processing information, and we're utilizing that information to best serve this person. So after we fall in love with asking questions, now it's the time for us to do the fourth step, which is to listen to the answers of those questions. And now we're getting into the fifth and final step of effective communication, and that is to implement the no complaining rule. If there's a problem, like Vanilla Ice says, if there's a problem, I'll solve it. Well, guess what? If there's a problem, pair that with a solution. If there's a problem, bring a solution to the table. The moment we start talking about problems and complaining and griping and moaning, all we're doing is introducing more negativity, more toxicity to a place that cannot afford either. And if we don't stop if we don't eliminate the complaining and the griping and the problem discussions, all we're doing is negativity is slowly seeping in and creeping into the workplace, and we simply can't afford that. So eliminate the no complaining rule. We're not going to complain unless we're bringing a solution along with that complaint or that problem. Now, I do want to say it's important, and unfortunately I learned this the hard way. It is important that at home I'm not going to suggest that we implement the no complaining rule. Here's the thing. When I say I learned this the hard way, sometimes my wife wants to vent, and as her husband, I don't want her to be unhappy. And so my initial thought is, I want to fix this for her. I want to bring a solution to the table. And so when she brings me a problem and I try to bring a solution, sometimes she says, hey, Josh, I don't want you to try to fix this. I simply want you to listen. So then I go back to step 4 of the 5 steps of effective communication. And I'm reminded that men, with our spouses, we sometimes need to just simply listen. Okay. So at work, implement the no complaining rule. At home, you know what? It's touch and go, but I trust that you're going to make the right decision. And one day we're all going to get it figured out, hopefully. But anyway, hey, I want to thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. As a reminder, I will be live in person on November 8th, Wednesday morning, November 8th from 8 to noon, discussing this topic and much more in my Limitless Leadership training program. There are 40 spots available. I can tell you right now, we're about halfway filled with this training. So if you're interested, reach out to me. You can find me at thebeardedleader.com. You can connect with me and we can schedule a free connection call. Happy to walk through any questions you might have, address any comments you might have. And at the end of the day, though, I simply want to connect with you. And so I'd love to be able to connect with you and communicate with you in the process. Now, once again, thank you for tuning in to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.